1 minute ago, John Force finally broke his silence on Austin Prock's shocking departure from JFR. His voice was shaken. His message was raw. And for the first time, John admits the truth. The disagreements, the strain inside the team, and how Austin leaving has changed everything, from the future of JFR to the emotional toll on Britney Force. It happened just hours ago, quiet, unannounced, and nothing like the high-energy persona John Force has carried for half a century. There was no sponsor banner behind him, no team gear, no PR rep hovering off camera. Just John, sitting at a table in a dimly lit shop office, hands clasped, eyes red, voice low. And for the first time since Austin Prock's shocking departure from John Force Racing, he finally decided to speak. He started with a long exhale, the kind that sinks deep into a man's bones. "I should have talked sooner," he said. "A lot sooner." The words were slow, measured, not the rapid-fire, motor-mouth delivery fans know. This wasn't John Force the showman. This was John Force the father, the mentor, the aging legend staring down the heaviest truth of his career. He admitted the silence wasn't because he didn't care. It was because he didn't know how to talk about it. Every time he tried, emotion stopped him. Every attempt at a statement turned into a knot in his throat. He said he felt ashamed, confused, and guilty for how things unfolded with Austin Prock. Then he said the line that changed everything. Austin didn't leave because he wanted to. He left because something broke inside this team. And I was part of that. John's voice wavered as he explained that the months leading up to the split were filled with tension. No one outside the pit saw creative disagreements, mismatched expectations, and the kind of emotional strain that builds slowly until it snaps. He admitted he pushed Austin hard, maybe too hard, and took for granted the toll that pressure was taking. He didn't blame Austin. He didn't blame Britney. He blamed himself for letting problems sit in silence until silence became the problem. Fans watching had never seen him so vulnerable. His eyes glistened. He kept wringing his hands. At one point, he looked away from the camera entirely, gathering himself before continuing. "This wasn't just business," he whispered. "This hurt the family." And with that, John Force didn't just break his silence. He shattered the image of invincibility he had long before Austin Prock ever walked out of the John Force Racing pit for the last time. The signs were there. Quiet, gradual, almost invisible to anyone outside the team. John Force says it wasn't one argument or one dramatic moment that caused the rupture. It was the slow erosion of communication between a young driver rising fast and a legendary team owner who'd spent decades shouldering the weight of expectations. In the early days, Austin was the future. Young, sharp, fearless, the kind of driver who could light up a scoreboard and energize an entire fan base. John loved that about him. He saw himself in Austin, raw talent wrapped in stubborn passion. But as Austin's success grew, so did the pressure inside JFR. John finally admits something fans never heard before. "I pushed him to be the next big thing. Maybe before he was ready. And I didn't give him enough room to breathe." Austin wasn't just racing against competitors. He was racing against history, against the Force legacy, against impossible expectations inside a team that had built its identity around dominance. And while Austin worked hard to fit into that mold, the cracks began showing. Crew chiefs clashed over setups. Austin felt unheard on tuning decisions. John, balancing Britney's car, sponsors, media demands, and his own health, started missing key conversations. Meetings grew tense, debriefs grew shorter. Austin began withdrawing. John chalked it up to focus. But really, the young driver was carrying stress he didn't know how to express to a man he idolized. Then came the comparisons. Public, constant, unavoidable. Is Austin the next John Force? Is he taking over for Force someday? Is he replacing Britney as the new face of JFR? What outsiders saw as compliments, Austin felt as pressure. What fans saw as excitement, John now sees as unrealistic expectations placed on a driver still learning who he was. John's confession is heartbreaking. I didn't see how heavy it all was on him. I didn't see it soon enough. That was the first crack. No shouting, no drama. Just a slow, silent shift inside the team that no one spoke about. Until it was too late. Carried for decades, when Austin Prock's departure became public, fans immediately waited for John Force to say something. Anything. But John stayed quiet. Days went by, then weeks, then months. The silence grew louder than any statement could have been. Now, for the first time, John explains why. It wasn't that I didn't care, he says. It's that I cared too much, and saying the wrong thing could have hurt him. John admits he was torn between two roles: the team owner, responsible for explaining the departure, and the father figure who wanted to protect Austin's reputation and future. Every statement he drafted felt wrong. Too cold, too emotional, too risky, too revealing. He says he wrote at least a dozen versions of a public message, some angry, some apologetic, some defensive. But he tore them all up because none of them honored the truth without exposing the pain behind it. John also feared the media. He feared headlines, twisting his words, blaming Austin, blaming Britney, or fueling speculation about chaos inside JFR. He didn't want fans turning Austin's departure into a scandal. He didn't want to spark division in a team already hurting. But the biggest reason he stayed silent? He wasn't ready to face his own guilt. I felt like I failed him, John admits softly. And I didn't want to talk about failure. Not when it involved someone I cared about. He reveals that Britney was struggling during this time as well. She needed her father's emotional support, but John was torn in too many directions. Team meetings, sponsor calls, TV commitments, health challenges, and the pressure of keeping JFR afloat in a sport where consistency is everything. Talking about Austin meant confronting the fact that I couldn't keep this family together the way I wanted to, John says. Silence, in John's mind, was protection. Silence was space. Silence was a way to avoid hurting Austin, Britney, or the team. But silence eventually became its own kind of wound. And now, as John finally speaks, fans hear the pain in his voice. The pain of a man who wished he'd spoken sooner, but couldn't find the strength to face what really happened. John Force has always described JFR as a family, but even families hit breaking points, often in moments that seem small from the outside, but carry the weight of years behind them. That's exactly how the final fracture between Austin and the team unfolded. John recounts the moment that changed everything. It wasn't during a race weekend. It wasn't in front of cameras. It was in a closed-door team meeting where tensions had been simmering for months. A disagreement broke out over tuning direction. Austin felt the car wasn't responding the way he needed, and he pushed for changes. The crew chiefs pushed back. They felt his driving style needed adjustment. Austin insisted the car was inconsistent. The room grew tense. Voices rose. John stepped in, but his words didn't soothe. They clashed. John admits, I didn't hear him. I heard the pressure, the sponsors, the deadlines, not the driver who needed support. Austin wasn't being difficult. He was being honest. Finally, he wanted clarity, cohesion, a united team approach. But instead, he felt outnumbered, outvoted, out of place. The final straw came when Austin said something John never expected. I don't know if I fit here anymore. John froze. Britney's head dropped. The room fell silent. To Austin, it was vulnerability. To John, it felt like a punch to the chest. John reacted defensively, more from fear than frustration. He told Austin the team was bigger than any one person, that they all compromised, that he had to trust the process. But Austin didn't hear reassurance. He heard dismissal. Austin walked out of that meeting with tears held back. John stayed behind, staring at the door, realizing he'd mishandled everything. "That was the moment I should have gone after him," John says. "But I didn't. And that was the mistake that cost me one of the best kids we ever had." In the days that followed, Austin grew distant. He arrived late, left early, avoided discussions. John felt the wall, but didn't know how to tear it down. Then, one morning, Austin asked for a private conversation. It lasted 10 minutes. When it ended, Austin was no longer part of JFR. John Force says it was one of the hardest moments of his life, not because Austin left, but because he left feeling unheard. John Force finally describes the meeting that no one outside JFR ever knew took place. The moment Austin Prock sat across from him and told him something John wasn't ready to hear. It happened early in the morning, before the rest of the team arrived. Austin had asked for a private conversation. His voice unusually steady, but his eyes carrying weeks of exhaustion. John says he thought Austin wanted to talk about crew assignments or the next race weekend. Instead, Austin took a deep breath and said, "John, I need out." John remembers the exact way the room fell silent. A deep, heavy silence that felt too big for its walls. He stared at Austin, half expecting him to laugh or walk back the words. But Austin didn't flinch. He explained that he loved racing, loved the team, loved the opportunities JFR gave him. But he couldn't stay in an environment where he felt emotionally drained, creatively restricted, and constantly under pressure to meet expectations he never agreed to. Austin wasn't angry. He wasn't dramatic. He was defeated. John says those 10 minutes forced him to face what he'd ignored for months. Austin's stress wasn't temporary. It wasn't a phase. It wasn't immaturity. It was a young driver drowning quietly while everyone praised his talent. Austin told him, "I don't want to resent you, John, or Britney, or racing. But if I stay, I will." That line broke something in Force. He admits he didn't handle it well. At first, he tried convincing Austin to rethink things, to push through, to hang on until the end of the season. He argued the team could fix things, that changes were coming, that everyone had tough stretches. But Austin shook his head. He wasn't asking for negotiation. He was asking for release. Then came the moment John still struggles with. "Are you sure this is what you want?" Austin looked down and whispered, "No, but it's what I need." John finally understood. This wasn't a kid walking away from a dream. This was a man walking away from the pain that came with achieving it. When Austin left the building, John didn't call him back. He didn't chase him into the lot. He just sat there alone, realizing that leadership isn't about keeping people. It's about not breaking them in the process. For fans, Britney Force's reaction to Austin's departure was a mystery. For John, it was one of the hardest parts of the entire ordeal. Britney and Austin weren't just teammates. They were emotional pillars for each other during some of the most demanding seasons either of them had ever faced. Austin supported Britney through her struggles on and off the track. Britney encouraged Austin when he questioned whether he belonged at JFR. They worked well together because both knew what it felt like to carry expectations heavier than their own bodies. So when Austin walked away, Britney felt it like a personal loss. John remembers the moment he told her. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't get angry. She just went quiet. Quiet in that heartbreaking way where a person absorbs pain before anyone else can see it. John says Britney blamed herself, at least partly. She wondered if her father's pressure on Austin also reflected pressure she felt but never expressed. She wondered if she should have stepped in, talked to Austin, or mediated. She worried the team's internal tension had pushed him out, and she felt alone, again, in a sport that takes as much emotionally as it does physically. John's voice weakens as he explains how guilty he felt watching Britney withdraw. "She's my daughter," he said. "It's my job to protect her. But Austin leaving, it hit her harder than I expected." Britney tried to stay strong for the cameras, the sponsors, and the team, but privately she admitted to her father that her confidence took a hit. She wondered if JFR was falling apart around her. She wondered what it meant for the long-term stability of the crew. She wondered if she could carry the Force legacy alone. This is where John breaks down in the interview. "I didn't just lose Austin. I watched my daughter get hurt because of my mistakes." Britney didn't blame Austin. She never did. What she blamed, quietly, was the environment that pushed him away. And for the first time in decades, John felt powerless to fix it. When John Force talks about regret, it doesn't sound like a legend reflecting on his career. It sounds like a father and mentor grappling with the weight of emotional consequences he never intended to create. He admits the guilt didn't hit immediately. In the first weeks after Austin's departure, he threw himself into work, focusing on schedules, sponsorships, and car prep. He pretended everything was fine. But every time he walked past Austin's empty station, every time he looked at a suit that no longer belonged to anyone, reality broke through. John says he started replaying conversations in his mind. Moments where Austin tried to express frustration. Moments where he brushed the kid off because he thought toughness was the answer. Moments where he confused leadership with pressure, guidance with control. And then came the toughest realization. I treated Austin like I treated myself, and that's not fair to anyone. John choked up describing this part. For decades, he survived by outworking, outlasting, and outpushing everyone. He believed pressure made champions. He believed discomfort built greatness. But Austin wasn't John Force. He was a different kind of driver, talented, driven, thoughtful, and John finally understood he had pushed him with the wrong tools. "I wanted him to be great," John says, "but I didn't see I was pushing him toward breaking, not rising." He admits he should have listened more, should have mentored differently, should have recognized the emotional toll before it became a breaking point. John even confessed one painful truth. "I was scared to lose him, but I was too proud to say it." And with that, he revealed the deepest wound of all. Austin leaving didn't just hurt the team. It hurt the man who had built it. Because John Force didn't just lose a driver, he lost someone he cared about, and a piece of his legacy he thought he'd pass forward. When Austin Prock walked out of JFR, it didn't feel like a normal roster change. It felt like a structural shift, the kind that sends shockwaves far beyond the garage. John Force admits the team wasn't prepared for the emotional and operational fallout. Austin had become a cornerstone, a rising star whose presence energized the entire organization. Losing him meant more than losing a driver. It meant losing momentum. John describes those first weeks as confusing, unsettling, and lonely. Meetings felt tense. There was no longer that young spark in the room, the kid who smiled at pressure and thrived in chaos. The energy changed. Crew members whispered privately about the future, unsure whether the team was spiraling or evolving. Even fans sensed something was off. Attendance dipped, social media grew quiet, and speculation ran wild. Sponsors called. Media asked questions. People wanted certainty, but John didn't have any to give. He admits he tried to power through, pretending everything was fine. But every time he suited up, he felt the absence like a weight on his chest. Austin wasn't just another driver. He had been part of the next generation John Force Racing needed, a bridge between the past and the future. Without him, JFR faced a crossroads. John acknowledges that Britney carried much of the emotional fallout. With Austin gone, she shouldered more responsibility, more spotlight, more pressure to represent the future of the team. But even she couldn't fill the vacuum Austin's departure created. Internally, JFR had to rebuild, not just its lineup, but its identity. John says they spent countless hours restructuring roles, reassigning crew chiefs, and rewriting long-term strategic plans. They had to rethink what the next 5 years looked like, not only competitively, but emotionally. John admits he feared the team would fracture further. He feared Britney would lose confidence. He feared sponsors would question the stability of JFR. And most painfully, he feared Austin's departure marked the beginning of something he'd fought against for decades. The slow fading of the Force legacy. But instead of collapsing, the team united in a way John didn't expect. They didn't just work. They supported each other. They listened. They adapted. They rebuilt. Still, the question hung in the air. Could JFR ever be the same without Austin? John doesn't sugarcoat it. No, but maybe we can be something better if we learn from what happened. In one of the most emotional sections of his statement, John Force shifts from talking about the past to speaking directly to Austin Prock, not as a team owner, not as a legend, but as a man who feels the weight of what he lost. John looks into the camera, his voice cracking, and says, "Austin, I should have told you this sooner, but I'm saying it now. You didn't fail this team. If anything, this team failed you." He goes on to explain that Austin brought heart, fire, and raw authenticity to JFR. He praises Austin's work ethic, humility, and loyalty. He reflects on moments when Austin lifted the entire team with nothing more than a smile or a joke after a bad run. John then admits a truth that surprises everyone. "I pushed you too hard because I saw greatness in you. But greatness doesn't grow under pressure alone. It grows when it's supported. And I didn't support you the way I should have." He apologizes, genuinely, vulnerably, for not hearing Austin's concerns, for not giving him room to develop his own driving identity, and for expecting him to fill a void that wasn't his to fill. He even apologizes for the comparisons. "You're not the next me. You're not the next anybody. You're Austin Prock, and you deserve the freedom to be that." John says he hopes Austin knows how much the team still cares about him, how much they believe in him, and how much they want him to succeed, whether that success happens at JFR or anywhere else in the sport. He ends this section with a line that fans will replay for years. "If you ever want to come home, the door isn't just open. It's waiting for you." But John doesn't say it expecting Austin to return. He says it because he finally understands. Some people don't need doors. They need closure. And John is finally ready to give him that. John Force closes his message with the honesty of a man who has fought for everything. Titles, respect, legacy. But now finds himself fighting something far more personal. The realization that he is not invincible, and neither is the empire he built. He reflects on aging, on the weight of carrying a team, on the dual role of being both a father and a leader. He admits he spent decades running at full throttle, believing he could control outcomes through sheer force of will, but losing Austin showed him a truth he'd avoided for years. You can't lead people if you don't listen to them. He says Austin's departure forced him to confront a painful reality, that the world has changed, the sport has changed, and he must change with it. He acknowledges that he can't fix everything with intensity or passion. He must grow, soften, and learn to mentor instead of mold. He also shares the personal emotional toll. Nights he couldn't sleep. Days he felt responsible for Britney's sadness. And moments when he questioned whether he was still the right man to run JFR. He confesses the hardest truth of all. This wasn't about losing a driver. It was about losing the trust of someone who believed in me. But this is not a eulogy for the team. It's a promise. John vows to rebuild JFR with transparency, empathy, and communication. He vows to be a better listener, a better mentor, and a better father to his daughters and his team. Losing Austin hurt, he says, but sometimes pain is the only thing that makes you stop long enough to learn. He ends with a final emotional thought, one that captures the heart of everything he revealed. Legacy isn't about trophies, it's about people. And if I don't take care of the people, then none of this means anything. Fade out as John lowers his head, overwhelmed but honest. A man wrestling with the cost of leadership and the hope of redemption.